You know, a thought occurred to me when I woke up in my bathtub this morning. I've said before that Marvel might be running out of creative energy after the big blowout of Avengers Endgame, and it makes me wonder if audience interest will start to wane now that most of their favourite characters have been replaced with something else. But the irony is that just as the MCU might be heading into troubled waters, the DC movies finally seem to be getting their act together. Aquaman was a surprise hit that grossed over $1 billion worldwide, while Shazam proved to be a winner with critics and audiences. The point is, DC seems to be in a much better place now than it was a few years ago, and a lot of this change in fortune can be put down to the success of Wonder Woman. Most people probably didn't expect much from Wonder Woman when it was first announced, least of all me. It was another movie in a failing franchise, directed by someone I'd never heard of, starring someone I didn't particularly care about, set during a conflict that most audiences probably know nothing about, and dealing with a character I knew best from the shitty 1970s TV show. Sorry, Linda. On paper, Wonder Woman seemed to have everything going against it, but everyone likes an underdog, and we were all pleasantly surprised when the movie hit theatres and turned out not to be a complete disaster. In fact, it went on to gross over $800 million worldwide, established Gal Gadot as a leading lady, and helped to resurrect a film universe that seemed to be on its last legs. Well, until Justice League dropped on us like a $300 million turd. Everyone was loving Wonder Woman, and they just couldn't say enough good things about it. But that was then, and this is now, and since the dust has settled, it seems like a good time for me to look back on Wonder Woman and assess it through lenses unclouded by expectations and excitement. Beer goggles and cataracts will have to do. So join me, dear viewer, as I thrust deep into Wonder Woman with a comprehensive review, refusing to pull out until I've reached the most satisfying of conclusions. So Wonder Woman kicks off with a bedtime story for young Diana Prince that tries and fails to explain the absolute madness of the world in which this story operates. I'll do my best to sum it up for you, but honestly I could probably devote an entire video just to picking apart the lore of this one. The gist is that a few thousand years ago, Zeus and the gods of Olympus decided to create mankind for a bit of a laugh one day. But one person wasn't laughing, and that was the god of war.
I warned you.
Finally.
No, not that one. I mean the real one, Ares. I mean, honestly, what's the point in having a god of war if you're not planning on having any actual wars? Isn't a guy like that just guaranteed to cause trouble? Ah, whatever. So anyway, in a shocking twist of fate, the god of war started making wars happen, so Zeus created a race of Amazon warriors to help spread peace and love amongst mankind. That's a bit like creating fast food to help spread fitness and healthy eating amongst the fatties. So this triggers a war amongst the gods, and Ares kills them all except Zeus, who forces him to run away, but one day he'll come back. So Zeus creates a weapon capable of killing Ares, gives it to the Amazons, and sends them away to the hidden island of Themyscira, where they'll have absolutely no idea what's going on with the world outside, and do nothing to protect humanity. Yeah, makes sense to me, I guess. Anyway, flash forward a few thousand years, and little Diana's growing up into Gal Gadot, and she's training to be a soldier with Robin Wright, the general of the Amazons army. You know, this setup raises a few questions for me. Like, how exactly does aging work on this island? If everyone who lives there is immortal, then how is it even possible to age at all? How come Diana grew from a little girl into a woman? Do you reach a certain age and just stop, and that's like your default setting? Is it the same age for everyone? But then how come her mother and Robin Wright are clearly played by much older actresses, which implies they've been getting older themselves? And why do the Amazons spend so much time training when there's literally nothing for them to do? They haven't fought a war in thousands of years. Why do none of them ever try to leave the island? Why don't they have any knowledge of the outside world, when it would totally make sense for them to keep tabs on humanity in case Ares returns? I mean, for all they know, he might have wiped out the entire human race hundreds of years ago. Why hasn't their technology or weapons advanced at all during the thousands of years they've had to prepare? I guess they didn't have a magical bullshit mineral that can do anything and solve any problem, or an insufferable teenage arsehole that can do all their science for them.
Sneakers.
Fuck off, film. Anyway, the peace and tranquility of Diana's life is shattered by the arrival of Steve Trevor, an American spy who's on the run from the German military in a stolen biplane. The plane crashes offshore and Diana saves him, and holy shit, that is one beautiful woman right there. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. So it turns out Steve isn't alone. A bunch of German soldiers in boats penetrate the shield around the island and invade the place. Wait, what the fuck? Were they seriously trying to follow an airplane using rowboats? Did they really think they'd be able to keep up with it? Ah, whatever. So the Germans storm ashore and the Amazon army shows up and they have a big battle and Robin Wright gets killed by gunfire. Because it turns out swords and spears aren't all that good against 20th century infantry weapons. Bet you guys wish you'd invested in a bit more R&D now, eh?
Sneakers.
Fuck off, film. You know, I have a few questions about this scene. How exactly does this shield around the island work? Is it literally just there to hide the place visually, but you can totally pass through it without any issues? If so, how come nobody's discovered the place by accident before now? I mean, I can understand how people might have missed it in ancient times, when there were fewer ships and trade routes, but this movie takes place in the early 20th century. There were literally thousands of vessels travelling the world's oceans by this point, and you're telling me not one of them happened to pass this way ever? Also, why do the Germans decide to invade this weird magical island that appeared out of nowhere when they have absolutely no idea what the place is, who or what lives there, or what's going on? Why does the battleship in the background start sinking for no apparent reason? Why are the Amazonians meant to be the greatest fighters in the universe, but they get kind of owned by a bunch of disorganized German conscripts armed with bolt-action rifles? Imagine if they tried to take on the US military of today. It would be horrific. Why haven't they built coastal defences, lookout posts or fortifications to protect their island from this kind of attack? They've had thousands of years to prepare for this shit, but spears and arrows is the best they can do. Fuck off, film. So anyway, the Amazons take Steve prisoner to interrogate him. He explains that it's now 1918, the world's been at war for the past 4 years and millions of people are dead. Steve was sent to infiltrate a German weapons factory, developing a new kind of poison gas that could win the war for them, and he was on his way back to London to report his findings when his plane crashed in the ocean. I love how he's totally perplexed that they don't seem to understand what war he's referring to. Look around you, mate. Do these people really seem like they're up to date on current events? Anyway, Diana reckons this war business is all the work of Ares, so she decides to go out into the world with Steve and lay the smackdown on him. And her mother tries to stop her because that's pretty much all she does in this movie. Anyway, the plot needs to move forward, so off she goes. They get in a boat and just sail right through the magical shield around the island. So many questions. So they get to London and Steve delivers his report to all the generals there, and Diana translates the intelligence he recovered because she can speak every language on Earth apparently. Fuck off, film. It's worth pointing out that most modern languages are less than 1,000 years old, so there's absolutely no way she could know this stuff, but whatever. It seems that General Ludendorff is planning to drop the poison gas all across the Western Front, killing millions of people and dragging on the war indefinitely. What a scoundrel. Diana realises Ludendorff must be Ares in disguise, so she wants to go kill him, but the generals are all like, nah, it'll be fine, because they think the Germans are ready to sign an armistice that'll end the war. But then David Thewlis shows up to help them out, because he helped broker the armistice in the first place, and he doesn't want the peace treaty to fall apart. Sure hope he doesn't end up betraying them all because he has his own hidden agenda. So they're on their way to France to put a stop to Ludendorff's plans, and they recruit an ethnically diverse team to help them. There's a smooth-talking North African spy, a generically wise Native American, and a drunken Scottish asshole. You know, it's stuff like this that gives my country a bad reputation. So they get to France and reach the Allied trenches completely unopposed, because that's a thing you could totally do. It's not like there's hundreds of thousands of troops in the area who would totally stop you getting within 10 miles of the front line. Anyway, Diana gets sad because there's a woman there with a baby who tells her the Germans captured her village, which is kind of weird because Steve just finished saying the front line is basically static and hasn't changed in over a year. So, has that woman just been sitting in the trench for the past year waiting for something to happen? Didn't anyone think to evacuate her? Oh well, you've got to motivate your protagonist somehow, I guess. Writing is hard, isn't it? So Diana decides she's going to save the random French village, but to reach it, she has to cross no man's land, the death zone between the Allied and German trench lines. So that's exactly what she does. Now I have to admit, visually this is a pretty cool scene as Diana forces her way through no man's land, taking everything the German military can throw at her, and ultimately inspiring the Allied soldiers to launch an attack of their own to liberate the village. It makes you feel nice things deep inside, but then you stop to think about it with your actual brain for a second and you realise it's all a bit pointless. Like, why waste your time and effort fighting the Germans head on when they're not even your real enemy? You're just gonna stir up another huge battle that'll cost thousands of innocent lives. I mean, do you really think the German military would allow a major breach of their front line without trying to counterattack and close the gap? This is exactly why World War I battles were so costly and pointless. Even if you made it across no man's land and captured the frontline enemy trenches, there would be like 5 more defensive lines waiting for you right behind. Plus, they'd just launch a counterattack and push you right back out again. And what's with Diana's wildly varying power levels? This woman is strong enough to lift a tank and go toe-to-toe with Superman, but she's stopped in her tracks by machine gun fire. Really? Fuck off, film. So anyway, the German High Command are having a big party at a nearby castle, and Diana and the team head there with different objectives. Diana's there to kill Ludendorff, because she believes once Ares is dead, people won't want to fight anymore. But Steve's mission is to find the poison gas and destroy it, so he stops Diana from killing him. Again, I direct you to the fact that Diana's an immortal demigod who's super strong and basically indestructible. She could literally kill every single person in that castle without breaking a sweat. There's no reason why Steve should even be capable of stopping her. Whatever. So Ludendorff launches a poison gas attack against the French village, and it kills everyone, and Diana's sad now because it turns out civilians can get killed in wars too. Who knew? So they follow Ludendorff to a nearby military base where the poison gas is being loaded into a long-range bomber. This reminds me of the climax for another movie set in another war, but at least that one was kind of plausible because technology was advanced enough to make it feasible. Anyway, Diana finds Ludendorff and they have probably the most one-sided fight in cinema history. An immortal, indestructible demigod versus an elderly German man on steroids. Guess who wins? The problem is that killing him doesn't end the war. People just carry on like nothing happens. What kind of flim-flammery is this, sir? Now Diana's confused because she thought Ares was corrupting humanity to make them fight each other, but it turns out humans are just assholes and war is kind of what we do.
War. It's fantastic.
So Steve realises she's going to need a few days to get her head around this, so he leaves to intercept the shit-looking German bomber. That's when David Thewlis shows up. Wait a minute, what's he doing here? I thought he was a kindly old politician from London town. But he's actually Ares in disguise. He's been behind the whole thing all along. What an absolute bounder! But Drinker, you smooth-talking ladies' man, I hear you say, isn't he the same guy who brokered the peace deal with the Germans? Why would a god of war want peace? The truth is, I've got no idea, because the script doesn't seem to know either. You see, this is where the movie's shaky plot starts to fall apart. Apparently Ares set up the armistice knowing it would eventually fall apart and everyone would go to war again because he wants humanity to destroy itself so the world will finally be at peace. What the actual fuck? That's your plan? You're the god of war. Shouldn't you want humanity to exist in a state of perpetual conflict? If there's no people, there's no war, so there's no point in you even existing. And then he claims he magically influenced people like Ludendorff to keep the war going, but then he totally contradicts himself a second later and says the whole war thing was inside them the whole time because humans are flawed and they love war anyway. So which is it, mate? Are you the genius mastermind of this entire conflict? Or are you just standing by and twirling your moustache while the world burns itself? If I didn't know better, I'd say the writers were sacrificing logic and narrative consistency for the sake of having a shocking twist. But then, what do I know about storytelling? Now, this scene might not make any sense, but I do like the pacing and the setup of their confrontation, and for a minute I actually thought this movie was going to do things a bit different. Maybe Diana was going to have to outthink and outsmart her opponent. Maybe Wonder Woman would buck the trend of tired CGI crapfest battles. Maybe this movie would do something smart and original for once.
Then I will destroy you!
Ah, never mind. So they fight and stuff explodes and it's all pointless because they're both invincible anyway. Then Steve sacrifices himself to destroy the poison gas bomber, so Diana gets sad and she uses the power of love or something to shoot bolts of lightning at Ares, and then he blows up. And then everyone magically stops fighting, which is the exact opposite of what this movie was trying to tell us about human nature, but whatever. Writing is hard, and we need to wrap this thing up, I guess. So the movie ends with Diana in the present day, deciding to be Wonder Woman again, fighting cruelty and injustice with renewed hope and optimism. Shame she doesn't know what's coming next. And that's it, that's the plot of Wonder Woman. Before I really get into my criticism, I will say there are a lot of things this movie gets right. The casting of Gal Gadot was a brilliant choice. She's beautiful and natural in the role. She seemed to capture Diana's sense of wonder, innocence and optimism, and she actually seems like a genuinely good and humble person that you can't help but warm to, unlike someone I could name. Patty Jenkins really seems to understand her limitations as an actress, and she works around them pretty effectively, allowing her more experienced co-stars to do most of the heavy lifting. And there's a decent chemistry between her and Pine, although for some reason he's picked up a stutter in this movie that really boils my piss after a while.
What are they doing?
I don't know. I don't know.
Ares is dead. They're
Because
fighting.
that's because maybe it's them.
Ares is dead.
Jesus Christ, man, just spit it out. Anyway, it makes me laugh that they gave everyone on Themyscira an Israeli accent rather than try to make Gal Gadot speak like an American. Diana at least has a good character arc. She goes from a naive and sheltered young woman who sees only the best in humanity to a wiser but ultimately sadder character who's experienced the worst aspects of mankind. But ultimately she regains her faith that there's something noble in the human spirit that's worth fighting for. Most of the action scenes are well shot and there's enough downtime and character moments in between to pace things out. The dialogue is passable, there are some decent jokes even if it lacks the slick wittiness of the Marvel movies, but at least it's not as dull and pretentious as the Zack Snyder films. There are problems with Wonder Woman though, and most of them revolve around the script. The villains' motivations are muddled and confused, constantly trying to bend themselves around whatever's actually happening in the story, and usually they end up contradicting themselves and undermining the film's message. Ludendorff and Dr. Poison are pretty dull as secondary antagonists, which is a shame because they're played by good actors who could do a lot more if they had better material to work with. The Village People wannabes also had the potential to be good, but aside from Samir, they never really do anything useful. The Scottish guy is the absolute worst example. He's got PTSD and he can't bring himself to shoot anyone, so you might think his plot arc would be about learning to overcome his fear and fight to save his friends at a crucial moment. But you'd be wrong, he's just as much of a useless arsehole by the end as he was at the start. What's a waste of time? The final battle seemed like it was going to do something interesting until it disintegrated into a mindless, overblown, ridiculous CGI mess where I couldn't even tell what was going on half the time. I also couldn't tell you how Diana actually defeated Ares in the end. It's not like she found some hidden flaw in an otherwise unstoppable enemy and used it to turn the tables on him. She just kinda blasted him and then he was gone. Wonder Woman clearly wants to say something about the conflicted nature of humanity, our destructive impulses versus our capacity for bravery and sacrifice. It just doesn't know exactly what it wants to say or how to get it across. What you're left with instead is a superficially charming film with good intentions that knows how to pull all the right emotional strings, but ultimately misses the mark because its script just isn't smart enough to deal with the weighty philosophical themes it tries to address. Honestly, I think most of us were so amazed that it wasn't a steaming pile of garbage that we were willing to overlook its flaws and just enjoy it for what it was. The problem is that what it was got consistently blown out of proportion in our collective minds until the film ultimately took on a reputation that it didn't quite deserve. Did I hate it? Not at all. In fact, I like it a lot more than most movies of its kind. But it's my job to drink and to criticise as honestly as possible. And now that I've done one, it's time to get cracking on the other. Oh, and that's all I have for today. Go away now.